When Melissa Gilbert looks back at her life, especially the years she spent on Little House on the Prairie, she sees a time filled with love, pressure, confusion, and change. At 61, she finally opened up about Melissa Sue Anderson, the actress who played Mary Ingalls, and the truth about their relationship after years of rumors. But before we reach that truth, we need to understand the world they grew up in, because their story makes sense only when you know the life Melissa Gilbert lived before and during the show. Melissa was born in 1964 in Los Angeles and adopted by a couple who were closely connected to the entertainment industry. Her adoptive mother was a respected actress, and her adoptive father was a talented comedian. From the moment she entered their home, she was surrounded by cameras, scripts, rehearsals, and famous faces. This made acting feel completely natural to her, like something she was meant to do without even thinking much about it. She started appearing in commercials when she was just a toddler, and soon, casting directors noticed her confidence, warm smile, and natural charm. By the time she was 9 years old, Melissa was already auditioning for major television roles. One of those auditions was for Laura Ingalls on Little House on the Prairie. During the audition, she connected instantly with Michael Landon, who played her father on the show. She said he had a way of making kids feel safe and seen, even during stressful moments. When she got the role, she became the face of the show almost overnight. Millions of people watched her grow up on television, and because of that, she felt like she had two families, her real one and the one on the set. But being a child actor is not as simple as many people think. Yes, there is attention, excitement, and fun, but there is also pressure, long working hours, and the constant feeling that you must be perfect all the time. Melissa felt this every day, even when she was very young. When the show began filming, she met Melissa Sue Anderson, who played her older sister Mary. Anderson was already experienced in acting and was known for being very disciplined and serious. She was the opposite of Gilbert, who was energetic, playful, and always curious. The two young actresses were put together in almost every scene, and although they were supposed to be sisters on screen, off-screen they were very different people. Melissa Gilbert has said many times that Anderson was hard to read. She didn't smile much, didn't joke around, and didn't open up easily. But Gilbert was a child who loved closeness, laughter, and friendship. Because of this, she sometimes felt unsure about Anderson's quiet nature, often wondering if she had done something wrong or if Anderson simply didn't like her. At the same time, the adults on the set treated the two girls differently. Melissa Gilbert was outgoing, expressive, and always ready to engage with people, so naturally she received a lot of affection. Melissa Sue Anderson, who was more private and serious, often received respect but not the same warmth. When you're a kid, you notice these things even if you don't fully understand them. Gilbert said that sometimes she felt like she wanted to get closer to Anderson, maybe even become good friends, but whenever she tried, she felt a wall between them. Anderson wasn't rude or unkind, just distant, quiet, and focused on her work. And because she was the older girl on set, she carried a level of maturity that made her seem more like an adult than a kid. Still, both girls were growing up in an environment where they had to act like two different people at once, children when the cameras were off, and professionals when the cameras were on. Gilbert remembers many moments when she wanted to laugh, make jokes, or play like any child her age, but she couldn't because the schedule was strict and the scenes required full emotional focus. Anderson, who had a very dramatic role, especially when her character goes blind, was under even more pressure. Because her character experienced tragedy on screen, she had to perform intense emotional scenes week after week, which made her even more serious and careful about her work. When Melissa Gilbert finally spoke about Anderson at 61, she didn't try to hide these differences. She explained them clearly, saying that, as a child, she couldn't understand why Anderson felt so distant. But as an adult, she now sees that Anderson had her own pressures, responsibilities, and expectations. The truth is, they were simply two very different girls trying to survive the same tough industry. As the years passed, Gilbert became the center of attention both on and off the show. Fans loved her cheerful energy and expressive face. She became a symbol of young innocence and bravery. Meanwhile, Melissa Sue Anderson carried heavier storylines, became more guarded, and sometimes seemed unreachable to other cast members. According to Gilbert, people often believed the two girls didn't get along, or that they disliked each other. But in reality, it wasn't hate. It wasn't anger. It was distance, simple, natural distance between two children who were built differently from the inside out. One wanted connection. The other wanted focus. And because of that, they drifted into their own separate spaces. By the end of her early years on the show, Melissa Gilbert had begun to understand that not every person in your life is meant to be a close friend. Some people are simply there to walk the same path for a little while, even if they never become extremely close. The relationship between the two young actresses was exactly that, a quiet, respectful coexistence, shaped by their personalities and by the pressure of the world around them. Gilbert carried these memories with her into adulthood, and eventually, at the age of 61, she was finally ready to share the truth in a calm, thoughtful way. Not dramatic. Not harsh. Just honest. As Melissa Gilbert grew older and continued working on Little House on the Prairie, she slowly began to understand more of what was happening around her. She started noticing how different personalities, expectations, and pressures could shape the way people behaved. Melissa Sue Anderson, who was older and had more experience in acting, carried herself like someone who had already learned the rules of the business. She was professional, calm, and very serious about every scene she filmed. Gilbert, on the other hand, was naturally emotional, expressive, and open-hearted. This difference became even more clear during the show's major storylines, especially when Anderson's character, Mary Ingalls, went blind. That storyline required intense emotional acting and took Anderson into a much darker and more demanding place. She had to rehearse more, focus more, and stay deeply connected to her role. For a child actor, this was a massive challenge. So while fans sometimes wondered why Anderson didn't seem as playful or outgoing as others on the set, the truth is simple: she didn't have the luxury to relax or fool around the way Gilbert could. Melissa Gilbert has said that when she was younger, she often misunderstood Anderson's quiet nature. She thought Anderson didn't like her or didn't want to be around her. But with age, she realized that Anderson was under pressure to perform at a high emotional level in many episodes, and that pressure naturally made her more distant. Some of the adult cast members also treated Anderson like an older, more responsible child, which made her step into a more grown-up role too soon. Meanwhile, Gilbert was treated like the bright, charming little girl of the set. She received affection, jokes, and warmth from almost everyone, which made her feel more open and free. This difference in treatment created a natural separation between the two girls. It wasn't personal. It wasn't intentional. It was simply how the environment shaped their interactions. Throughout her time on the show, Gilbert had strong friendships with other cast members, especially the twins who played Carrie and Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie Olson. These friendships were loud, funny, and full of childhood energy. They played games, laughed between scenes, and sometimes got into harmless mischief together. But Melissa Sue Anderson rarely joined them. She stayed close to her script, preparing for long emotional takes, and maintaining a level of professionalism that was rare for someone her age. To the other kids, this made her seem more mature, almost like a young adult who didn't have time for silly games. As Gilbert grew older, she realized that these differences didn't mean Anderson was unfriendly, they just meant she was different. And different doesn't mean bad. It simply means she had her own way of coping with the pressure she lived with every day. Over the years, fans often created stories about the two actresses, claiming they fought behind the scenes or had a secret rivalry. People love drama, and when two young actresses are involved, audiences tend to imagine tension even when none exists. But Melissa Gilbert has been very clear about this: there was never any big fight. There was no screaming, no jealousy, no dramatic argument that broke their bond. Instead, what existed between them was a quiet, polite distance. Gilbert tried many times to understand her co-star, but Anderson didn't open up much. She didn't share her feelings or talk about her fears and dreams the way Gilbert did. And for two young girls working in a fast-paced, demanding environment, this created a gap that never closed. When the show eventually came to an end, the cast went their separate ways. Gilbert stayed in the public eye, continued acting, became involved in politics, and created a large family. Anderson, however, chose a more private life. She stepped away from Hollywood, started a family, and moved to Canada. This made the distance between the two actresses even greater, not out of bitterness or negativity, but simply because life carried them in different directions. Gilbert has even said that she rarely heard from Anderson after the show ended, and that Anderson did not stay close to many of the cast members. This wasn't unusual, because many actors who spend their childhood in the spotlight later decide to step back and live quiet, peaceful lives. Despite the long silence between them, Melissa Gilbert never felt anger toward Anderson. In fact, she grew to appreciate the strength Anderson had shown as a young actress. As an adult, Gilbert realized that she herself had always been surrounded by warmth, support, and friendship on the set, while Anderson had received less emotional comfort and more professional pressure. With this understanding, Gilbert finally saw that Anderson's quiet nature wasn't rejection, it was self-protection. She was a young girl dealing with a very heavy emotional workload, and the only way she could stay focused and calm was by building a small, safe space around herself. When Melissa Gilbert reached the age of 61 and finally spoke openly about her relationship with Anderson, she approached the topic with kindness, clarity, and maturity. She explained that the real truth wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a scandal. It wasn't a hidden secret that would shock fans. The truth was simple: they were two girls growing up in a stressful environment, each dealing with fame in different ways. Anderson chose privacy and seriousness. Gilbert chose openness and connection. And because of that, their paths didn't blend as closely as people expected. Gilbert said that as she grew older, she learned to see people not from the eyes of a child, but from the eyes of a woman who had lived through her own challenges. She realized that she and Anderson never had a real disagreement, they simply lived in different emotional worlds. And now, when she looks back, she feels nothing but respect for Anderson's commitment, talent, and strength. She remembers how hard Anderson worked, how deeply she gave herself to her role, and how many people cried watching her emotional scenes. That alone, Gilbert says, deserves admiration. Many fans expected Gilbert to reveal some shocking story when she said she would speak the truth about Anderson. But instead, she offered something more meaningful, a compassionate explanation of childhood differences, personal pressures, and the silent struggles young actors face behind the camera. She explained that she and Anderson were never meant to be inseparable friends, but they were never enemies either. They were two parts of the same story, side by side, shaping one of the most beloved shows in television history. As this powerful story about Vivian Vance moves toward its final chapter, we come closer to understanding why her last interview touched so many hearts and why it continues to live on even today. In this last part of the documentary-style transcript, we will gently explore her final reflections on life, the way she looked back at her work with deep emotion, and the honest words she shared about the people who shaped her career and her identity. Vivian spoke openly about the weight she carried for most of her life, the pressure of Hollywood, the constant comparison to others, the internal battles that no one ever saw, and the bravery it took for her to keep moving forward despite the invisible pain. In her final interview, Vivian wanted people to understand that even someone who made millions of viewers laugh every week could struggle quietly behind the scenes. She talked about how people often forget that actors are real humans with doubts, fears, and insecurities. They see the bright lights but not the darkness behind them. She shared that her biggest wish was that people would stop assuming that fame equals happiness. She spoke very slowly at this point, taking her time because each sentence held emotional weight. She explained that she had spent many years trying to hide her pain because she didn't want to disappoint the audience or the people she loved. She wanted to be strong, but hiding everything slowly drained her. Vivian said one of the hardest things about her career was constantly being judged, not just professionally, but personally too. She explained that people often made comments about her looks, her weight, or her personality, and even though she acted confident, many of those comments hurt deeply. She said that sometimes she felt she lived under a microscope, where every small mistake, every choice, every emotion was analyzed or criticized. But even with all of this, she never stopped caring about the people around her. She never stopped showing kindness to those who needed it, and she never stopped giving her best, even when she felt like she had nothing left to give. That was the true heart of Vivian Vance. The interview asked her what she considered the most beautiful part of her journey, and Vivian paused for a long time before replying. She said that the most beautiful part was realizing that the joy she gave people truly mattered. She talked about fans writing letters saying her performances helped them through tough times. Some said her humor helped them survive loneliness. Others said watching her with Lucille Ball taught them how to laugh again after heartbreak. Vivian said that these letters made her understand that her life had meaning far beyond Hollywood. She said she felt grateful knowing she had helped bring light into people's lives, even on dark days. She also shared that she wished she had been kinder to herself. She said she spent too many years thinking she wasn't enough, that she wasn't pretty enough, talented enough, thin enough, young enough. She told the interviewer that she hoped younger generations would learn from her story and understand that self-worth does not come from fame, approval, or outward success. She looked straight into the camera and said softly, "You deserve to love yourself even when you are imperfect. Even when you are hurting. Even when others don't understand you. You deserve love simply because you exist." Those words became one of the most